really excited to be hosting this discussion, and pleased to say that we've got some of the brightest experts and minds working across our life sciences client organizations today, delivering recruitment, talent acquisition solutions. And we're going to be looking at topics today around skills and workforce planning and talent pooling. So really the theme for us is looking within the life sciences industry, how are we seeing organizations moving to skills-based workforce planning to directly increase their talent pools? And if I think about why that's relevant today, well, over the last year or more now around the world, we've really seen a huge amount of change being driven by the impact of the pandemic in a relatively short space of time. And that's been driving the transformation in talent acquisition and across all business areas for many organizations, but not least in the life sciences industry that we've all been working within. And it's actually proving to be something of a game changer in terms of how it's accelerating opportunities for these organizations that are now forecasting growth and seeing new market opportunities than they perhaps were before the pandemic. To capitalize and sustain on this growth, we really believe that life sciences organizations now need to think about moving from critical workforce planning to skills-based workforce planning to increase the availability of talent into their organizations. So what does that mean in terms of skills-based workforce planning? Well, it's taking a broader based approach to the types of talent, the type of skills that they can bring into their organization to be successful in the roles that they have. It's also thinking differently about the types of skills that they need in their business, but perhaps aren't those that they've had traditionally. So, we all hear about the need for digital skills, data scientists, increasing focus on R&D. And we have heard recently from many of our client organizations that they need to start looking in adjacent skill sets or adjacent industries and not just drawing from the same talent pools that they traditionally have done. So we brought together this group of Cielo life science subject experts from across the globe to discuss what life sciences companies can be doing now to increase their talent pool and acquire more of the talent they need to fuel their organization's growth. So let's start with this question. And Josh, I'm going to come to you first. If you think about talent pools, how can optimizing the candidate experience lead to increases in those talent pools? What are your thoughts on that?
So for today, now more than ever, candidate experience is ultra critical. Candidates are doing their research well ahead before they often become applicants. They're going to Glassdoor, Indeed. They're finding out what the journey is like before they even decide to apply. So having a great candidate experience only helps fuel the amount of candidates that ultimately will convert to applicants and be interested in your organization.
Great, really good point. When you think about some of the research that candidates are doing, how are you seeing that impact that candidate experience? What is it that they're looking into?
Yeah, so certainly, organizations now, diversity and inclusion is ever critical. So candidates are doing their research ahead of time to better understand, whether or not they're going to be a cultural fit for that particular organization, and really, better understanding, not only the interview process and ultimately the first day that they join the organization, but what is their opportunities well beyond that as it relates to growth and opportunity and further career development within that organization.
Okay, so research is important when they think about the candidate journey and the experience they're going to have. What about the application process? Tanya, maybe you've got some thoughts around that and how that's impacting the candidate experience.
Well, I think the way I see it is that every candidate is a potential consumer. So, the candidate's recruitment journey is a reflection on the way a company operates. So a positive candidate journey in a connected world builds a really strong online image, which in turn creates positive referrals. So if you think about companies like Amazon, Apple, they create really strong brand loyalty, and that's because they give a really good customer experience. So optimizing your candidate experience is the same. They're more likely, if they've had a good experience, if the process is slick, if it was personalized, they're more likely to engage with you, and they're more likely to tell their connections about what a great experience they've had. The outcomes of that would mean that even if they're not successful with that current application, they're more likely to opt into a talent pool. It will also really foster good reputation on, to Josh's point, good social media channels, ratings platforms such as Glassdoor, as well as increasing company website visits, applications, and referrals.
Great. So lots of different ways that we're seeing candidates come into the process and then really think about their journey from an application perspective. Maybe Scott, if I can come to you for a moment to talk about sort of how we're driving increases in talent pools. What are some of the techniques and things that you're seeing across your client programs and through your own experience?
Sure. Data analysis is such a huge part of what we do now in talent acquisition, finding where the hot spots are for the different diversified talent pools that we're searching for. So having that outreach is so important. And word of mouth, David, is still such a huge piece, or it is the number one way that we still see candidates, talk about their experiences, but that word of mouth, it has so many more outlets now. And because of that volume of reach, that's where that candidate experience can be so important, because we do hear about candidates within my programs that just always have great positive experiences that we see where that feedback turns into applies. We also have have experienced other clients that have not had such a historical good candidate experience, and we absolutely could see the talent pools not be as high because of what some of the candidates have said on social media or that outreach. So it is a huge piece, absolutely.
So from your perspective then, the reputational image an organization has is still as important as ever, and potentially you could argue more important, because anything positive or negative is amplified through these social channels and through the connections that candidates and applicants have and into the broader market.
Absolutely. And it's also the information that is most available now for candidates. And really looking at it from almost a generational recruitment standpoint, seeing how the most important topics are those pieces, like as Josh was talking about, the DE&I approach of an organization. A lot of those things are, and really the civic responsibilities that companies show. A lot of those things are top of mind for candidates. And when I talk to my recruiters, those are the things that are more being asked about than many other things, even benefits of some sorts.
Great, that's really interesting. So Michelle, I'd like to bring you in at this point and just maybe some reflections of what you see across the markets in Asia that you are involved with, from a candidate experience perspective, and how you're seeing that play into sort of the success or challenges in building talent pools.
No, so definitely, I think I wanted to echo what Scott was saying. I think in terms of that word of mouth is still very much the first and foremost what people look at, and then that translates into was things like social media, LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and sharing other positive experiences, because we see how the candidate market now is so much more about how talent picks the employer instead of the employers only interviewing candidates. And we really have to see how it's important to make sure that these channels are effective, because we track them and we see an increase through different recruitment channels, more candidate applicants, and fewer offer rejections and more. So I think really in terms of seeing that, it makes a huge difference. I think also, especially in Asia, when some of the clientele or some of the organizations are actually quite traditionally rooted in just a word of mouth, that candidate experience really maximizes your single effort into creating more talent pool and more people coming over.
Yeah, I think the notion you mentioned there of candidates picking the employer, I wonder whether the group, any of you have got a view on this, but I still believe that we see beliefs in certain populations at hiring manager level or from a hiring leader behavior perspective that candidates will come to the organization and not necessarily a deep understanding and recognition that actually it's hugely competitive out there, especially for the sort of niche skills that we're looking for. And you need to understand as a hiring leader or a hiring manager that candidates have choice. I wonder if anyone wants to offer a view or perspective on that from what you're seeing in your programs.
Yeah, I think, certainly today candidates have more of a choice than they've ever had, and, referencing your earlier opening comment around the finite skills that organizations are seeking, whether it be digital talent, specialized R&D talent, these candidates are in high demand and they know it, and they're being very selective about where they're applying, where they're even looking. And the majority of candidates are very passive. So it's the messaging that you're putting out in the marketplace from a brand perspective to help draw and have a magnetic brand. That's the first component. But then certainly through the entire candidate journey, making sure that they have a great experience so that whether or not they join the organization today, it could be a situation where they could join you a year from now or 2 years from now. But if they have that negative experience, they may never consider you again.
Yeah, that's a great point, Josh. No, that's a great discussion, guys. I think just to summarize what we've heard, real focus on consumerizing the experience, recognizing that reputation is absolutely key, recognizing that I think in the segments that you're all operating, the types of skills that we're talking about that our clients and organizations are looking for are still in high demand, and therefore candidates have choice, mean that the importance of having a seamless and efficient and effective candidate experience and converting them through the process is critical to keep them engaged. So really good points, appreciate that. And I think we're going to wrap that part of the discussion. Let's move on to the next question. And I think, we've had a little bit of this referenced in some of what we've already heard you talk about, but if you think about technology and then employer brand and the importance of those two aspects of the process, how are we seeing technology, or in what ways are we seeing technology and or employment brand support increasing the talent pools? Tanya, what's your experience with this?
So I think with both tech and employer brand, you really have an opportunity to personalize a candidate's experience. So by making it both data and audience driven, you're making their experience with the company easier, more personalized, and therefore just more enjoyable. I think using the tech to enable us to have segmented talent pools, you can really think about things like targeted advertising, personalizing messages, and just really developing content to reach the candidate at the right place at the right time. And I think what we've heard from the earlier conversation is, reaching those passive candidates with the right messages is really key. There is a shortage of talent. These candidates have the opportunity of joining many organizations. So content that's really relevant to them and personalized to them, I think is key to attract them to the right organizations.
Great. So in terms of that personalization, then for you, employer brand sort of underpins that and how you develop that. And maybe just to build on the employer brand perspective, Michelle, if I come to you, how do you see employer brand techniques being adopted and being driven in the Asia markets, and how's that driving increases in talent pools?
I think definitely employer branding has become quite a hot topic in Asia in the recent years, just because in the past, I think a lot of multinational corporations were very much about doing employer branding from the global perspective. So the local perspective was not able to really provide a deep insight. And what this does is that you see different clienteles have lower attractiveness and awareness to their brand overall compared to key competitors. And what employer branding really does is that when we go in and really make sure that it's tied to really bring that experience to talent pool and that candidate overall satisfaction, it really does make a key difference when we're looking at from day in, day out kind of recruitment. So for example, when you're looking at clientele using their own personal stories to really then inflict it into local countries, those are the channels for that word of mouth and that enhancement in talent pool and making sure that there are good opportunities for talents in the market.
Great. Thank you, Michelle. Scott, I'm going to come to you for maybe a US or North American lens from an employer branding perspective. What are you seeing in your markets and where you're competing for talent, and how that's helping or how that's enhancing what we can do from a talent pooling perspective?
Yeah, David, I'll speak to it as a widely encompassing topic, because I think that's the area that a lot of our clients really have to focus on, is that it's not just the recruitment marketing and the social media outreach. It's also about the hiring managers and how they interact with the candidates. It's about our outreach and our approach from the talent acquisition space. It goes into those additional pieces, the culture of the organization, the D&I strategy, all of those pieces. That's where the focus for employment branding can be such a huge part from that global aspect, but then also from that localized piece, where certain sites I see having specific needs within an organization that changes when you change to a different site. So I think, again, going back to the data analysis and then finding out what the needs are or what is reflective of a local community is also a very important part of that total employment brand piece. And really, again, that's a lot of the information that is available to candidates and they do their research more and more, and that is what's going to have them hit the apply button, or say, you know what, I'm going to look at the next organization because this brand just doesn't look like it fits what my desires are as a candidate, and I know it's a candidate's market now, so I therefore I have my choice.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, we talk a lot in our branding practice, don't we, about the authentic voice that we're trying to convey for our customers. And I think that is fundamentally important to what you're describing. And actually, sometimes having candidates being able to self-select out of a process because the culture isn't aligned to them, then that also helps from an outcomes perspective if we think about getting the right candidates into the talent pool and into the application process. So yeah, some really good points and experience there, Scott. Thank you. Josh, I'm going to come to you next. And I'm asking about employer brand and technology all wrapped together in the sort of same concept, but they're both two very big areas of discussion. So let's switch it to a little bit more of a technology focus. What are you seeing in terms of how technology is helping to drive improvements in the quality or increases in talent pooling for organizations that you're working with?
Yeah, certainly candidates are looking for that consumer grade experience, and certainly our view at Cielo is we don't want to be a technology based provider, where that's our sole focus. Really where we're successful is that we're a people-enabled business backed by technology that allows us to really, have that personalized experience with candidates while making the process that much easier and smoother for them to allow for a great journey.
So let's explore that a little bit more then. So if you think about sort of technology interventions in that candidate journey, what are some of the ways, maybe over the last sort of couple of years, we've really seen enhancements in those steps through the application journey, or in those steps in terms of how we're communicating out to candidates? Can you give some examples around that, Josh? As we're sort of making that seamless and frictionless for those candidates.
Yeah, one of the things that a lot of organizations have done over the last several years is really evaluate the time just to complete an application. We find that candidates will often fall out during the application process because it becomes too cumbersome, and the reality is that they're very passive in nature to begin with, and if you make the application process that much more difficult, they're more attuned to ultimately fall out of the process and decide not to continue.
Great. And maybe if I bring that same point back to you, Tanya, what are some of the ways that you're seeing technology help with that candidate experience and ultimately driving better improvements in the quality and size of our talent pools?
I think, the more you can personalize and automate a candidate journey, I think that the more slick the process is, the better. And I see tech as being the major enabler in that. The use of AI, the use of chatbots, just being able to answer candidates' questions moment in time is really key to improving efficiencies in the process and actually connecting with them at the time that they were able to connect with us, which is largely out of hours. I think the point that you raised, Dave, as well is really valid about providing candidates with enough information to deselect themselves as well, because I think that's really key to making sure that candidates going into the funnel really understand enough about the company's culture, enough about the role to be able to make a really good and informed decision about whether it's the right opportunity for them.
Great, really good. Okay, I appreciate those thoughts and ideas, and I think if we think about or reflect for a moment on the topics of employer brand and technology, as I referenced there, Josh, both huge topics in their own right. So I think there's a lot more we could probably do to discuss around that, but some of the things I think we've heard from you all there around the ability we now have to personalize and segment messaging to particular candidate audiences and segments of populations. I think the improvements in outreach ability as well that we're seeing through employer branding techniques, and then the frictionless or seamless experience that we can offer candidates through adopting technology at the right points in the process, but not necessarily to the point of bringing the human touch completely out of that process as well, because that remains important when we think about the experience that we want to deliver to those candidates and stakeholders in the process. If I reflect on what we're talking about today, there's no doubt that the topics really bleed into each other when we think about the importance of an authentic employer value proposition and how we're conveying the uniqueness of a particular job opportunity to the candidate and talent pool. Scott, you've referenced this once or twice already in some of what you've talked about. What I'd really like to think about now is how can enhancing a diversity, equity, and inclusion strategy help to drive improvements or increases in the talent pool? Scott, I'm going to come to you first, maybe from your perspective on that, and what you're seeing again in the US market.
Yeah, David, here in the US, this is a top of mind focus area from social and corporate civic duties, right? And from an overall aspect, this is when I speak with my recruiters, the number one area that we are being asked about right now is what is your organization doing to focus on these social justice areas, and having a good plan that you can share with a candidate really shows that this means that it is a top of mind topic for that organization. It is obviously across our social world, but from a corporate world, not every company can be able to say that. So having a good DE&I strategy is something that candidates do ask about and is really the top of mind right now. And I don't see that changing. And I had mentioned that generational recruiting and really keeping top of mind where the workforce will be going in the future, and really thinking about what got us here isn't what's going to get us there. I think that's one of those topics. The DE&I is really where what's going to get you there is what you have to focus on now, because that is going to be the continued aspect. And to talk about the talent pool of that, opening up opportunities, talking about skills versus years of experience, that's one of the areas where this is going to help most, because we've got a lot of great people coming out of universities or just in general that have experience within certain skills that we're really looking for. But you still see job descriptions that are written for 20 years of experience when some of these technologies have only been around for 10 years or less. And I think that focus within DE&I will actually even help within the skills versus years scenario that we talked about earlier.
Yeah, fantastic point, Scott. I think really interesting, and I think as a topic, I think this is or as a critical element, I think this has come even more to the fore in the last 12 to 18 months. And you talk about some of the social justice aspects. That's certainly been something that we saw a lot of activity around across our client base in the middle of last year. So we've not only had the impact of the pandemic that our client organizations have been living through, but also these social upheavals and social justice movements that are really driving that need for a clear strategy, but also then one that is translated into that sort of authentic employer voice when you think about the branding aspect, the EVP aspect of that as well. Michelle, I'd like to come to you from an Asia perspective. When you think about diversity and how you're seeing that manifest in your clients and across the clients you're working with, and the candidate expectations, how's that impacting talent pooling and the candidate populations?
I think that definitely compared to the US, Asia is slower coming to DE&I just because it's not something that is very commonly spoken about in Asia. It is picking up wind, but then that strategy then becomes very important. By putting a strategy in place and working at it, I think day in and day out, it really allows the talent pool to understand that we respect that people have different perspectives and different cultures. And whether as a clientele or as a company, we really have to make sure that we show people that we do what it takes to make sure that opportunities are there for them. And I think coming from life science, it's no secret that science definitely strives from diversity. It helps from rich backgrounds, perspectives, and the experience really maximizes innovation and creativity, which then links back to the talent pool and to what we're looking at in terms of how do we let the talent pool know that this is on top of our priorities and how we're doing it to make it happen for them to want to come join us and really help spread that word of mouth. So very much, I think, interlinked. And I really look forward, I think, for Asia to really put more strategy and emphasis on this, because it is something that is very important.
Great, thank you. Tanya, I'd like to come to you and just maybe some of your reflections in terms of some of the organizations you're working with across the Europe region or Europe, Middle East, Africa region. How are you seeing diversity play into that candidate proposition and how that's impacting talent pools for your customer organizations?
Sure. So I think for me, this one's pretty simple. If you've got a clear, measurable, goal-orientated DEI strategy, you're going to appeal to the largest pool of candidates. So by definition, why wouldn't you be doing this? By making your company a place where people are attracted and where they feel they can be themselves, you're going to get people registering their interest, sharing diverse perspectives, and referring some of their friends. So I think for me, being present in certain communities is really key. So whether that's LGBT, whether that's women in technology, being present in those communities, best practice sharing, really giving I suppose airtime to your brand to be shown as a diverse company is really key. And also focusing on different sourcing channels. That could be early talent, it could be career returners, it could be veterans. But again, this is all building and increasing a diverse talent pool. I think also what's really important, and in terms, we've talked a lot about employer brand, and we've talked a lot about messaging. I think, showing inclusion to the marketplace. Are you offering flexible working? Is there childcare support? Those types of messages are really key to get out to the marketplace to really build that picture of it being a diverse and inclusive place to work.
Yeah, fantastic. I really like the notion, actually, and maybe we can explore this a little bit more, of being present in some of those communities. And maybe Tanya, you could expand a little bit on that. And maybe Josh, you can also share with us some of what you're seeing in your programs. Tactically, what are our recruiters and teams doing? Because it isn't just about us working with our client organizations to develop the right employer voice and EVP proposition around diversity, but actually it's then recruiters and sourcers on the ground doing the work, to your point, Tanya, in those communities to drive the understanding and hopefully then drive more for applicant and candidates into the process. So Tanya, maybe you can expand on some of those tactics that you're seeing your teams adopt, and Josh, I'll come to you in a moment.
Absolutely. And these are really tactical, tangible things that you can be doing. And it's all centered around being present. So for that example, what are your recruitment marketing channels? Are you on diverse attraction channels? Is your brand out there on these forums? I think, if and we've talked very much around passive candidates, if I'm exploring a company and I'm looking at it through a diversity lens, I'm going to be looking to see whether that brand is represented in the places that I'm looking for them to be represented. And it's that kind of outreach and that kind of passive messaging and that really does, I suppose, elevate a brand in this space.
Great, thank you. And Josh, maybe building on that, I know in some of your programs, you've actually created a role for a diversity recruiting leader. So how has that helped, in terms of results from a candidate attraction and candidate talent pooling perspective?
Yeah, I think it's further education for our teams to better understand where the markets that we could potentially penetrate, what are the organizations that we need to be a part of, the different user groups to consistently get involved. That's really helped open up those doors, and certainly education is the key component for all of our teams to better understand where we can identify that talent. Taking it a step further, we've also, with many organizations, been having conversations around, do we need to, if COVID has taught us anything, it's that a lot of our work can be done anywhere. So if organizations will rethink, and life sciences traditionally is very much an in-person, on-site type of mentality as it relates to, their overall practices of having people on site. Organizations are rethinking that and, offering remote options that ultimately open up candidate pools that they've never been able to tap into, which further helps drive just the diversity strategy overall.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much for that. Scott, I'd like to bring you back in. You made some great points at the beginning. And any further reflections in terms of what you're seeing with your clients and candidates around the DE&I topic?
Yeah, David, the one area that I think from a outreach piece and a talent acquisition, a lot of the conversations I'm having with some of our affinity groups or partnered ERGs within our clients is that a lot of hiring managers or a lot of the employees of a company are seeing talent acquisition actually bring people to the door, but it's that next step of getting the door to open from the hiring manager aspect. And I think that educational piece is, and from the top, it's being told we need to increase percentages of X, Y, or Z type of diversity, but and there's a lot of rah behind that. But what I am hearing from in between, from talent acquisition and then from the top senior leadership saying we want these things to happen. Well, the middle now is what we really need to educate and help guide our clients to say, we have all these outreach efforts. We have all these types of candidates that we can look at that really reflect what our culture that we want to have in our organization, but we need more pull through, if you will, from hiring managers. And one of the things that I'm having conversations with those teams, those affinity groups, is to say, what can you all do from internal to really bring this to those hiring managers? So I've asked them, have you actioned this? You're saying you hear rah from the top, and you hear that talent acquisition is bringing these types of candidates in. Have you said to your hiring manager, or to your manager who is hiring a counterpart of yours, I only see one of what I look like. I would love to challenge you to say, can you bring in more of me, or someone that is reflective of X, Y, and Z, within the department or whatever. And I think that's the area that is oftentimes forgotten about, is that you can have a great program set up, you can have great opportunities that are actioned by talent acquisition, but we need hiring managers and the company to really say, we now need to see this pull through and the actual data and percentages of what our needs are to start coming up. And I think that's where some of the focus has to be shifted to.
Fantastic, Scott. I really like that, and I think there's some great thoughts in there, about how it has to be lived through the whole organization, not just a strategy set from the top, and nor something that operationally maybe our recruiting teams and our sources are delivering at the sort of bottom end of the organization, but actually bringing all of those middle tier parts of the organization together so that we live and breathe it together and actually turn the intent and the actions into the right outcomes, the right results from a diverse hire or diverse talent pool perspective. I really liked your point, Tanya, about, why wouldn't you do this? Why wouldn't you set up a clear strategy to broaden the talent pool that's available to the organization? I think the build on that would be linking that into Scott's great observation around just connecting every part of the organization to bring that together. Okay, well, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate you taking the time to contribute to these key topics. Some great discussion, some great examples from the client programs that you're supporting today, and also really insightful to get some perspectives from around the world and what we're experiencing as teams supporting clients across these key topics. There's no doubt in terms of what we've been living through and what I think we can all see on the horizon, we're only going to see an increased focus on the importance of talent attraction, the importance of employer branding, how technology can continue to drive great experiences and the outcomes that we need. And if we can bring all of those things together, then obviously what we're doing then is increasing and improving the quality of the talent pools that we're bringing for our client organizations that ultimately will bring better talent into their organizations faster. So really appreciate you contributing your thoughts and ideas on this today, team, and look forward to the opportunity to take this discussion further at another time. Thank you.